vested in the Senate, in the collective body, or will it be vested in single individuals? It has been portrayed that the Republicans wanted to change the rules. It is the majority party, the Democrats, that did in fact change the rules, which puts more power into the president's hand. I think the election was very clear that Iowans believe they need to have more say in what goes on in government. There needs to be more transparency. Senate Republicans wanted to preserve those prerogatives that we believe are inherent in an elected body representing the people. And over the past 2 years, we have had the will of the people obstructed by one individual, the majority leader of the Senate. And the people spoke last November. We saw more seats flipped from Democrat to Republican than ever in the history that anybody can remember. And this was an attempt to continue to preserve the right of the people to have their say and not just one individual.
During the last legislative session, you were criticized that you weren't willing to use those rules to force a vote or some sort of procedure on the floor for the Senate. And so they're kind of pointing at this morning's hearing to preserve the rules that governed last year's body as an indication that maybe you weren't forthcoming or correct on that.
There have been some that have portrayed this as different than it was in the past, and that somehow I stood in the way of having a vote on the Iowa Marriage Amendment. There is no parliamentary procedure to allow a vote on the Iowa Marriage Amendment. There wasn't under the old rules. There isn't under the new rules. There is no change in that. So there was absolutely no parliamentary procedure by which a vote could have been had on the Iowa Marriage Amendment. There was an attempt this morning using the old rules, but it failed. Now, it did highlight the power that is vested in the majority party that prevented that vote, but there was absolutely no way to bring an Iowa Marriage Amendment forward for a vote.
So given what you said, that issue's dead for this session in the Senate, maybe next session too?
No, there are other means by which that can be brought up, which we employed over the past 2 years. There are other means, but if the majority party vows not to do it, Mike Ronstall obstructed over the past 2 years, he still has those same powers to obstruct.
Do you get a sense that there's support in the Senate for this voter ID bill to get it to the governor's desk?
Well, excuse me, it's a proposal that maybe not in every detail. I know he's part of it because I don't know where the original draft of the bill, whether it came from Secretary Schultz or whether it came from one of the members. I have to go back and look at that. I know that Secretary Schultz has been involved in the process, so that's one of his agenda items. I mentioned that to say that it's my understanding he's been in the Senate talking with folks, and I don't know, I mean, they're another body with 50 people, and they can, maybe they'll have some changes, maybe not, I don't know. But I think philosophically, well, you can speak for your own caucus. My assumption is that, like I said, it's part of the Republican agenda.
So after the public hearing on Monday, do you intend to bring that before the House floor later?
Peter Upmeyer and I haven't talked about next week's calendar. Hey, one more point I wanted to mention that I failed when I first opened, that it's, at least what I've been told, is the Democrats are out saying that this budget spends more than what was spent last year because of the way Governor Culver set up his budget. If you do an apples for an apples comparison, meaning making sure that the dollars that are going to the regents are all counted in both fiscal years, and the dollars going to wherever are counted for both fiscal years, this is a cut of just under $200 million. So, you know, I would hope that they would be honest and forthcoming about their math.
What about your math? Where are the numbers coming from for House Republicans that say, we see more that can be cut than what Governor Branstad sees that can be cut? Are you looking at different numbers?
No, well, I don't know. No,
Why do you think
math
more
is,
than he can?
that's why?
Yeah.
Well, I think for one reason, I mean, he only had, not that his, I mean, he could speak for himself. Okay, I'm not speaking for him. But he had, what, 3 weeks to put this together? Some of his directors have not even been in the chair very long. To my knowledge, none have been confirmed. I mean, he hasn't had quite as much time to go through it all. Math is the math, and our math agrees with what is in the proposal, because we think he's been open and fair and transparent in what he proposed, unlike the previous budget. Our point is, we think there's more opportunities to save Iowa's money, and I think he agrees with that. He just hadn't had time to work through it, but that's what the whole process is about, and that's what we're going to do. We've got half a dozen or 8 or however many weeks it is of budget subs coming up. That's their job, and that's their charge.
I don't really have time to pour through this much.
You'll get it done tonight.
But it indicates the legislative branch is going from 30 million to 35.7 million next year. Do you need $5.7 million more dollars to operate?
Well, actually, as I start to learn the legislative budget more, I am also looking for opportunities to cut different things.
But is that-
We've
are
looked
those
at
numbers
dues. What?
correct? Are those numbers correct?
That is the budget we sent down to DOM. And the bulk of that was a change, and this was something that, I don't know whether that happened when Speaker Murphy was still the speaker or whether that was after me. It was somewhere in the transition there that we talked about that, but that's the change from an 80-day session budget to a 110-day session budget. And, and our hope is, one of the reasons we brought the dates forward in the joint session, or the joint rules, is so that maybe we get out here a little bit early and like I said, we're looking for opportunities in the legislative budget as well.
So you get out of here early so you can come back for a special session on education in the fall?
If a consensus is reached, apparently that's the plan he laid out
And
today.
another one in June or July for redistricting part 2?
You know, redistricting will be interesting. We'll get the numbers here. That one actually says the rules are kind of the rules on that, and we'll go through it.
The only thing I would say is, when the governor called for shared sacrifice, I think that is absolutely appropriate. We have not had time to comb through all of the details, but we do know what will happen if we continue down the path that we've been headed the last few years. And all you have to do is look at Illinois, New Jersey, New York, California. You cannot spend more money than you take in and expect to have a healthy government, happy taxpayers, or an environment where employers choose to come. You can't do it. The governor recognizes that. Rather than look at the individual details with which somebody will always find fault, I think we absolutely must look at the general direction. And the governor's taking a very, very responsible position, saying we can't continue spending more than we take in or living beyond our means.
Senator Racker, a few comments perhaps? Your
I guess,
reaction?
Mr. First of all, I was very impressed with the governor providing what I would consider an intellectually honest discussion and presentation of the budget challenges and his budget proposal to Iowans. And I look forward to working with the governor's office, Senate, House, both sides of the aisle to craft a budget that does spend no more than we take in. It will have significant spending reductions to do that, and there will be significant tax relief, I believe. Those are the challenges that are before us, and I'm ready to get to work. Our subcommittees are. We think we got a good start with House File 45. We think there are still a lot of good pieces in that bill that will be moving forward, and expect to have continued discussions with Senate leadership on both sides next week, as early as Monday, as to the next steps of the process.
At first blush, anything you think will be the hardest to sell? Anything you think this is a no-brainer that's going to go through?
I've not been into the details of what the significant cuts are. I can imagine, though, listening to the governor today, that when he talks about shared sacrifices, the low-hanging fruit of such things as, $98,000 for free T-shirts out of gel, those things are going away. It's the more difficult decisions about significant reductions in other areas that are delivering core services, and how do we provide those core services to all Iowans and eliminate what may be nice but not necessary spending on the behalf of the state and citizens.
How many layoffs do you think there's going to be?
I'd have to look at the detail to see, but there's no question that the governor's indicated he's reviewing all employees that were hired in the last 6 months, as I understand, and has had an issue with that. I also understand that if we're not able to fulfill the collective bargaining agreement that Governor Culver did on his way out, the state is still required to pay those salaries, and in order to pay those salaries out of a diminished budget without funding them, that will result in layoffs. So that's a decision that was made through the collective bargaining process, and we just have to be, again, intellectually honest with Iowans as to what we can